in the relentless expanse of the desert, the weary villagers pressed on, their camels carrying them across the shifting sands towards the promise of a new village. But as they travelled, the sun beat down on them relentlessly, and the air shimmered with waves of heat. The journey had been difficult, but still, hope flickered in their hearts. And as days turned into nights, the caravan of camels moved forwards with a determined pace. It seemed as if fate itself guided their path, aiding them. Well, that was until that fateful sunny morning when the relentless march came to a mysterious halt. Confusion quickly spread amongst the villagers as one camel, a creature whom they had come to rely on, abruptly ceased its movements. Perplexed, they dismounted, casting weary glances at the seemingly unresponsive beast. It was as if the very air held its breath, waiting for something unknown to unfold. But then, as if possessed by some otherworldly force, the motionless camel began to dig furiously into the sand. The villagers exchanged a nervous glance, unsure of what prompted this bizarre behavior. The desert fell silent, interrupted only by the rhythmic scrape of hooves against the sand. But then, after a few minutes of that, emerging from the depths of the sun-baked ground, the camel unearthed something. It was a pulsing red crystal. Its glow casting an eerie radiance upon the stunned faces of the villagers. The air cracked with an otherworldly energy, and the hushed awe settled over the scene as the villagers gathered around that enigmatic crystal. A sense of foreboding washed over them as they could feel the very power emanating from this unearthed artifact. And rather quickly, a collective decision seized them, for they were going to take this crystal with them and were going to move it to their new home. And so, very carefully, they loaded that crimson gem onto the backs of their camels, the very creatures that had led them to this mystifying revelation. And then they continued their strides in the boiling desert, heading closer to that village. And so, the caravan pressed on for several days, the red crystal glowing ominously as it nestled between the humps of their camels. However, each step taken was accompanied by a subtle hum from that crystal, and the air seemed to pulse with mystery. The villagers, unaware of the power that they were transporting, forged ahead through the unrelenting desert. But then, just a few days before the end of their travels, from the horizon, they saw it. A tempest of swirling sand. The air thickened with grit, and the once clear sky became a storm of sand. Panic seized the villagers as they struggled against the fierce winds that blew against them. They attempted to shield their faces from the stinging assault of that storm, and so, with their visibility reduced to almost nothing, the caravan ground to a halt. The villagers, whipped by the relentless gusts exchanged worried glances. The camels, burdened by the mysterious crystal, shift nervously, their eyes reflecting the fear of the unknown. Realizing the danger that they were in, the group quickly scrambled to try and find cover. And as they were restrained against the force of that sandstorm, desperately searching for refuge, they saw it. In the midst of the chaos was a looming silhouette, partially obscured by the raging sandstorm. It was a desert temple that stood before them. The villagers were scared, as they had no idea what lurked within it. But they had no other choice, and so the villagers and their camels rushed towards it, the winds howling around them. The entrance beckoned them like a portal to safety. In mere minutes that felt like an eternity, they reached the entrance and they hurriedly sought shelter within the stone structure. The camels, with their pulsating red crystals, added an air of mystery to the already mysterious temple. The villagers, catching their breath, peered into the darkness within, their eyes starting to adjust to the dim interior. However, as they ventured further into the depths of that temple, hoping that would bring them more safety, a sudden flash of blinding light enveloped them as they all began to scream out in pain. After 3 months, the villagers in that new village were starting to get rather concerned, as those travellers should have arrived by now. And well, since they knew the rough path that the caravan would have taken, combined with the growing sense of dread that had consumed them, those villagers were compelled to act. And so, in the gathering dusk, the villagers decided to organize a search party, as they were determined to locate those missing travelers. Torchlights flickered in the gathering dark as the group set out into the unknown, their faces etched with determination and bravery. However, just as fate would have it, a malevolent force seemed to conspire against their rescue mission, as a sudden and ferocious sandstorm descended upon the desert at the moment that they began their search. A storm of swirling grains that obscured the vision of those searchers and swallowed their cries in its howling winds. The search party, injured by the relentless assault of sand, was forced to retreat, their efforts thwarted by the very elements. Confusion hung heavily in the air back at that village, because the moment that they returned, the storm was over. And so, it was as if an insidious curse clung to the fates of those travellers, mocking the efforts of those who sought to rescue them. And so, the villagers, undeterred but deeply troubled, exchanged concerned glances. In their desperation, there emerged a collective realization amongst the villagers. There was only one being with the knowledge, the strength, and the resilience to confront the supernatural forces that seemed to enslave their fellow villagers in that storm. The name echoed through the anxious crowd like a whispered prayer, beacon of hope in the encroaching darkness.
Mr. Steve,
one of the villagers declared, those words carrying both subscribability and urgency. The legendary figure, the protagonist of countless tales of survival and conquest, was their only hope for saving those missing travelers. And so, very quickly, news of their situation spread across the world. And in just a few days, Steve had heard all about it. And well, when that happened, Steve, the legendary figure known for his resilience and courage, actually agreed to the desperate plea of the villagers. And so, for that reason, he mounted his horse and he rode into the desert village. Now, the moment that Steve arrived in their village, the villagers' eyes began to reflect a mixture of hope and desperation. And so, to help him in this adventure, they presented him with their finest camel, a creature of unparalleled strength and endurance. And then they explained where the travelers should be, and the mysterious curse that seemed to be ensnared upon them. With a nod of gratitude, Steve readied himself, and he set off into the unforgiving deserts on the back of that camel. The horizon stretched endlessly before him, a canvas of shifting sands and hidden perils. The weight of the villagers' hopes rested upon his shoulders as he embarked on a journey fraught with uncertainty. Now, the initial leg of the expedition proved, well, uneventful, as Steve traversed thousands of blocks with the camel moving with relative swiftness. The deserts, though harsh and relentless, seemed to yield to his determination, and so hope bloomed in the hearts of the villagers as they awaited the news of their missing kin. Yet, as if sensing the impending clash between the legends and the forces that dwelled in the heart of the desert, it was only a few days later that the very elements seemed to conspire against the Steve as the curse began. As, just like the search party, a tempest of chaotic winds and stinging grains descended upon him with great ferocity. But still, undeterred, Steve pressed forward. The relentless gusts whipping at his face and slashing his skin did little to stop him. However, amidst the swirling sand, a crimson light pierced through the storm. An eerie glow that seemed to carry with it a malevolence that sent shivers down Steve's spine. However, he just dismissed it as a trick of the mind, the desert's illusions playing games with his perception. And so, determined, he continued to push through that storm, his will unwavering. But then, the air became heavy with unspoken darkness, and the haunting cry of a camel cut through the howling winds like you subscribing. This felt wrong, very wrong, as that camel seemed to scream out in immense pain and suffering. It shouldn't be like that. But still, Steve ignored that as he continued to head deeper into that desert, following the route given to him by those villagers, as he was determined to save those travelers. Hour after hour, he braved the relentless tempest, the glow in the distance growing more ominous with each step. The storm seemed to conspire with the malevolent forces that lurked beyond the veil of sand. A feeling of unease crept into Steve's thoughts, but he silenced it, attributing the sounds to the eerie symphony of the desert. As Steve pressed on, his every step was a testament to the unyielding spirit that defined him, determined to reach the heart of this mystery and bring an end to those unsettling cries and to save those travelers. And as Steve ventured deeper into the desolate expanse, his mount proved to be a loyal companion as they covered another few thousand blocks under the relentless sun and storm. However, eventually, an ominous shift occurred, an unsettling energy emanating from its very core. The once steady creature, the best that the village had to offer, began to resist Steve's guidance. Frantically, Steve attempted to soothe the distressed animal, his voice a calm counterpoint to the growing storm. Yet, as if possessed by an unseen force, the camel's demeanor shifted drastically, its eyes glowing with unnatural aura, and a low growl rumbled from its throat. Steve's attempts to calm that creature were futile. The camel, now more savage than domesticated, turned on him with sudden ferocity. The desert echoed with the clash of wills, a primal struggle between man and beast. With a final defiant growl, the camel broke free, tearing across the dunes, leaving Steve to confront the storm alone. Left isolated in the heart of that tempest, Steve faced the swirling sands and howling winds with a heavy heart. The storm was now an adversary without a respite, lashed at him relentlessly. With his trusty mount gone, Steve realized the limitations of his solitude and was forced to make a choice. As the wind shrieked around him, Steve, quick on his feet, began to dig into the shifting sands as he carved out a makeshift shelter, a pit in the desert's unforgiving surface. The sand, though soft, had become a tumultuous medium as Steve worked to create a safe area amidst the chaos above. The storm raged on, and the air was thick. Lying in his sandy refuge, Steve, usually a force to be reckoned with, felt an unfamiliar sense of vulnerability. Alone and exposed, Steve braced himself for what lay ahead, the desert secrets unfolding with each passing moment. But as Steve lay there in his sandy refuge, seeking solace from the raging storm above, the haunting echoes of the camel's screams and cries pierced through the howling winds once more. His confusion mingled with a rising sense of dread. A foreboding intuition for something unnatural loomed just beyond the veil of this tempest. Then, emerging from the chaos, it materialized. It was a camel, but it was unlike any that this Steve had ever encountered, as its form was twisted, a grotesque reflection of the once noble creature, with a single blood-red eye pulsing with malevolence. A shiver ran down Steve's spine as the air thickened with an otherworldly presence. This was no ordinary camel. No, this was the Blood Camel, a creature covered in darkness. Steve, resilient and armed with his trusty sword, sprang into action, swinging at the abomination before him. The blade slashed through the air with a determined arc, but just as it seemed the Crimson Eye would meet its demise, the Blood Camel vanished into the swirling sands. And as the demonic glow dissipated, Steve was left alone once more in the heart of that unforgiving sandstorm. The desert, now painted in shades of eerie red and obscured by the tempest, concealed the true nature of the Blood Camel's disappearance. Steve, sword at the ready, scanned his surroundings with heightened senses, his every nerve on edge. The air cracked with unnatural tension. The haunting cries of that camel echoed in the distance. But alone in the heart of that storm, Steve was forced to grapple with the realization that this desert held secrets far beyond his comprehension. With determination etched upon his face, Steve prepared himself for whatever lay ahead. The storm, the relentless, became a mere backdrop to the mysterious enigma unfolding within the desert. In that pit, time seemed to stretch endlessly, and Steve's mind wrestled with the bizarre events that had just unfolded as he waited for the storm to relent. And luckily, after what seemed to be several days of enduring the relentless tempest, the winds finally began to subside, and the storm was over. Emerging from the sandy refuge, Steve had no choice but to continue his journey through the desolate expanse on foot. The landscape, though unchanged, carried an unsettling aura, a sense that the desert held secrets that defied the logic of the known world. However, Steve was suffering, as he hadn't eaten anything or drunk anything for the last few days, and so he was starting to move rather slowly as his muscles began to wither away. But still, Steve carried on, and in the dead of night, as Steve traversed the desert, a glimmer of hope presented itself. It was an oasis on the horizon. It was filled with lush vegetation and cool waters. Thirst and hunger drove him forward, his pace quickening as he reached that magical sight. Yet, as reality collided with his desperate desires, the oasis dissolved before him, leaving him to face not an oasis, but the returning fury of that sandstorm. The winds howled once more, whipping the grains of sand into a frenzy. Steve, realizing at that moment that he had left all of his tools behind in that pit, suffered a sinking realization. Without any means of digging downwards, he was now vulnerable to the full might and power of that storm. And so, with gritted teeth and a determined resolve, Steve prepared himself for that storm. But it was stronger than ever before, and it roared around him. A symphony of chaos threatened to engulf him. But still, he braced against the relentless onslaught, his every step forward being defiance against the malevolent forces that seemed to shape the very fabric of the desert. As the sands whipped around him, Steve's mind raced. The enigmatic blood camel, the illusion of the oasis, and the unrelenting storm were all pieces of a puzzle. Something very strange was going on. But right now, Steve, in the heart of that desert, was battered and was on the brink of succumbing to the relentless sandstorm as his strength began to wane. The wind, an echo of angry whispers, threatened to carry him away like the grains of sand beneath his feet. And just as the last glimmer of hope within his heart was about to be swallowed by that storm's fury, a silhouette emerged from the swirling chaos. It was outline of a forgotten structure. It was partially buried beneath the sands, but it was his only hope. And so, with the final reserves of his strength, Steve fought his way towards it, his vision blurred by the relentless assault of that storm. And as he stumbled into the shelter of what appeared to be a desert temple, he felt a sense of relief. Bruised, battered, and almost broken, he was just thankful that he had found a sanctuary against the relentless force that sought to claim him outside. However, inside, the air hung heavy with the scent of dust and decay, as cobwebs coated the ancient stones, and the remnants of a lost civilization whispered tales of a time when this temple was vibrant and alive, while broken pots lay scattered on the ground, their fragments echoing the passage of time. The walls, once proud and sturdy, now crumbled under the weight of ages. But, undeterred by this eerie atmosphere, Steve retrieved his torch and clutched it like a lifeline as it cast its glow into the darkness. The flickering light revealed the haunting beauty of the Forsaken Temple as shadows danced along the corridors, and the air was thick with an unsettling silence. He ventured deeper, the echoes of his footsteps resonating through the ancient halls. Steve soon ascended to the second floor of that ancient temple, the torchlight flickering with an ominous dance. But what he saw there shattered the remnants of hope that clung to his weary heart. The lifeless bodies of the villagers he had set out to save lay sprawled across the cold stone floor, their vacant eyes reflecting the tragedy of an unknown demise. A profound sadness washed over Steve, a weight pressed upon him as he gazed upon the fallen. However, in the midst of this heart-wrenching discovery, an anomaly caught Steve's attention. an extra saddle discarded on the floor without a corresponding deceased camel. The macabre scene was perplexing. The other camels lay besides their fallen riders, but this one was absent. That didn't make any sense. And so, questions swirled in Steve's mind, and the mystery deepened. But, with nothing really that he could do, Steve was forced to just press on. His determination now fueled by a need to understand the particular circumstances surrounding the missing camel and the extra saddle. The once hallowed halls of that temple now tainted by the tragedy that had befallen the villagers. The room seemed to pulse with an unsettling malevolence. Broken items and the remnants of past lives littered the rooms, each piece being a fragment of a puzzle that Steve was desperate to solve. His thoughts raced, grappling with the fear of the unknown, until he felt it, a calling from the lower level. The sensation tugged at him, a spectral hand reaching out from the depths of the temple, urging him to descend into the unknown. Though the air thickened with an unspoken dread, Steve, fueled by a mixture of sorrow and determination, readied himself for whatever lay beneath. And so, with a deep breath, Steve leapt to the lower floor, his heart pounding with a mix of anticipation and dread. The torchlight cast long, flickering shadows as he set to work, mining away at the ancient stone floor with just his bare hands. The labor was draining, but his determination was unwavering, and after a short but intense struggle, the stone block finally gave way, revealing a dark chasm that seemed to plunge into the very heart of the overworld. But still, with a deep breath, he prepared himself as he leapt into the unknown. He hurled through the depths, heart pounding, until he landed in a chamber that defied imagination. That room, bathed in an eerie light, held treasures beyond his wildest dreams. Riches, food, water, and a plethora of enchanted gear. His eyes widened with disbelief at the bounty before him. Without hesitation, Steve began to eat all that food and drink all that water before equipping the enchanted gear. These items seemed to pulse with untold power, and he felt an exhilarating rush of energy as he equipped them. Yet, the moment was short-lived, as the room, concealing its malevolent intent, exploded in a blaze of chaos and force. The very walls seemed to crumble and unleash a torrent of destruction. Fortunately, the enchanted gear saved Steve from what could have been a catastrophic fate. But the force of that explosion was enough to propel him out of the dark tunnel and sent him hurling through the very heart of that temple. He tumbled through the air, disoriented and battered, until he landed with a bone-rattling thud on the very roof of that temple. The desert night stretched before him, and the stars seemed to shimmer with an eerie knowingness. Steve, dazed but alive, lay on that roof, his heart still racing from the tumultuous chain of events that had just unfolded, and amazement by the fact that he took no damage from any of it. But Steve, now perched on the temple's ancient stones, knew that this was far from the end of this extraordinary adventure. Because just as Steve was catching his breath, the night seemed to shudder with a renewed sense of foreboding. The echoes of the camel's screams seemed to pierce the air once more, a haunting symphony that resonated with unsettling familiarity. With a heavy heart, Steve looked up to witness something. It was the resurrection of the malevolent force. The blood camel, now larger and more malevolent than ever before, now stood before him. A realization struck Steve like a lightning bolt. This monstrous being was the missing camel from that temple, and it bore a sinister connection to the tragic fate of the villagers. In a moment of clarity, Steve drew his weapon, determination etched upon his face as he lunged at that monster. The blade met its mark, striking the blood camel with a force that reverberated through the desert night. Yet, unlike last time, the impact felt real, and the monstrous creature recoiled in pain. The fight had begun, and the air cracked with electric tension. Steve and the blood camel engaged in a struggle beneath the starlit sky. The sands bore witness to a clash between the forces of darkness and the unyielding spirits of the legendary Steve. The battle unfolded with a symphony of clashes, roars, and the occasional flash of enchanted weaponry. The red glow of the blood camel's eyes illuminated the battle, casting eerie shadows across the desert expanse. And as the fight raged on, each blow became a testament to the intensity of the conflict as the desert began to shake. Steve, fueled by the memories of the fallen villagers and the mystery of the darkened temple, fought with unwavering determination, while the blood camel, a malevolent force intertwined with the fabric of the desert, retaliated with a primal fury that seemed to echo from the depths of the most evil intent. In the climactic moment, Steve's strike found its mark, and the blood camel recoiled in agony. The air hummed with an eerie stillness as the legendary figure stood triumphant. The evil that had haunted the desert night had been vanquished, and the stars seemed to shimmer with a newfound clarity. With a heavy sigh, Steve stood amidst the aftermath of that battle, the weight of the journey etched on his weary shoulders. The desert night, once fraught with uncertainty, now held a sense of an uneasy calm. The blood camel, a harbinger of malevolence, had been defeated, but the mysteries of the desert still whispered in the wind, beckoning Steve towards an uncertain destiny. And as the final cries of the blood camel faded into the night, the relentless sandstorm ceased its fury. Yet, as Steve approached the lifeless body of the blood camel, an odd ringing sound echoed through the air, a melody that seemed to linger even after the battle was long over. The realization struck him like the subscribe button. The malevolence that he was sensing wasn't merely this creature's nature, but something far more insidious. The camel seemed tainted by a cursed virus, a darkness that lingered even in death. And so, determined to prevent any further harm, Steve, fueled by a sense of responsibility, hauled the lifeless body of that blood camel and cast it into a nearby river. His hope was that by doing this, he would sever the chance of that cursed virus spreading further. But unbeknownst to him, the true cause of the evil and malevolence wasn't the blood camel itself, nor was it a virus. No, instead, it was that red crystal that the villagers had unearthed all that time ago, as that crystal had bound itself to that camel and had corrupted it. But now that the crystal was free, it drifted along the currents of the ocean until it found a new host. And so, to learn about the new host of that evil crystal and the devastating consequences that soon followed, you'll need to watch this video.